My daughter Lisa handed me her phone before she stepped out to her car. "Watch this for me, Mom. The plumber's supposed to text," she said, and she was gone, and I sat at her kitchen table, holding her phone like the harmless thing it was. And then it buzzed in my hand, and a message slid down from the top of the screen, and it was not the plumber. It was from a group chat. The chat had a name, and the name had my name in it, and the first line of the message that I could not help but read said, "I really don't think Mom should be living alone anymore." I have replayed that single buzz 100 times. 2 minutes. Lisa was gone for 2 minutes to fetch something from her car, and she left her phone with me for the most ordinary reason in the world. If the plumber had texted in those 2 minutes instead, none of what I am about to tell you would have happened. That is how thin the line was between the family I had and the family I have now. One buzz, one message arriving a few seconds early, on a phone resting in the wrong hand. I do not think I will ever fully get used to how much turned on something so small. I sat at that table and I did not move. Because I was 65 years old and I had just discovered by accident, in the space of one buzz, that my 3 grown children had been having a conversation. An ongoing, organized, named conversation about me, and that I had never, not once, been a part of it. My name is Marjorie Hale. Everyone calls me Marge. I spent 38 years as a social worker here in Hartford, Connecticut, which means I spent my entire career in other families' hardest conversations, and I am about to tell you how completely unprepared that left me for my own. I am going to tell you what was in that group chat. But first, you have to understand the 2 years before it, and the one thing I had decided I would never become. My husband Don died 2.5 years ago. We had been married for 41 years, and I am not going to spend long on the grief itself, because this is not really a story about losing Don. It is a story about who I decided to be afterward. When Don died, I made myself a quiet, fierce promise. I had spent my whole career, 38 years of it, sitting in living rooms with families in crisis, and I had seen, more times than I could count, what happens to an aging parent who becomes the family's problem. The worry, the burden, the topic. I had watched grown children grow weary, watched the parents' whole identity shrink down to their needs and their decline. And I promised myself, the week we buried Don, that this would not be me. I would manage. I would be independent. I would be a mother my 3 children, Lisa, Greg, and Amanda, could simply enjoy, not a mother they had to manage. I would not be a burden. I built the next 2.5 years on that promise like it was the foundation of a house. I want you to understand where that promise came from, because it did not come from nowhere. It came from 38 years of evidence. As a social worker, I had been in the homes of more aging parents than I could ever count, and I had seen the slow, sad arithmetic over and over. The more an elder needed, the smaller they seemed to become in their family's eyes, until a whole person, a person with a history and opinions and humor, had quietly shrunk down to a list of needs and a source of strain. I had watched it happen to people I respected, and I had decided, watching, that whatever else aging took from me, it would not take that. I would stay a person. I would stay the mother, not the case. And so the promise was not vanity. It was, in my own mind, a kind of dignity insurance, paid for in advance. The terrible irony I could not see was that the very policy I bought to protect my dignity was the thing that would end up costing it. And I want to tell you what keeping that promise actually looked like, day to day, because the chat was about to show me that I had misunderstood my own behavior completely. Keeping the promise meant saying I was fine. Always. It meant that when Lisa asked how I was managing the big house alone, I said wonderfully. It meant that when Greg offered to come set up something on my computer, I said I had it handled, even when I did not. It meant that when Amanda noticed I had not been to my friends group in a while, I waved it off. I declined the help, all of it, every time, gently and firmly, because accepting help felt like the first step down the hill toward becoming the thing I had promised I would not become. I thought I was protecting my children from the weight of me. I thought I was being strong. I had a whole private picture of myself as a woman handling her widowhood with grace and requiring nothing. And that picture was about to meet the group chat. There is one evening I think about now with a particular ache. About a year after Dawn died, all three of my children came for dinner, and at some point Amanda said, carefully, that they had been talking, and that they wanted to help me think about whether the house was still the right place for me. And I remember exactly what I did. I smiled, and I told them, warmly and firmly, that I appreciated it, but that I was perfectly happy, and that they were not to spend their energy worrying about their mother. And I changed the subject to the grandchildren. I thought, that night, that I had handled it gracefully. I thought I had reassured them. I know now what I actually did. My children had brought the conversation to my dinner table, the real conversation, the right way, to my face, and I had picked it up and gently handed it back to them and closed the door. They had tried the front door that night, and I had locked it. Is it any wonder they eventually stopped knocking and went around the back? So there I was at Lisa's kitchen table, holding her phone, and the message was on the screen, and I want to tell you honestly what I did. I knew it was wrong. I knew that thread was not mine to read. But I had just seen the words, "Mom should not be living alone." And there is no mother alive who could have set that phone down. And I did not. I opened the chat, and I scrolled. I have thought a great deal since about whether I was wrong to read it. By every rule I would have given a client, that thread was private, and it was not mine, and I should have set the phone face down and waited for Lisa. And I will not pretend I made a noble choice in that kitchen, because I did not. I made a mother's choice, a helpless one. But I have also come to believe something gentler about it. That thread was not, in the end, a secret being kept from a stranger. It was a conversation about my own life, my own house, my own future, being held in a room I was not allowed into. And there is something not quite right about that, however loving the intentions, about a person's own life becoming a discussion they have no seat at. So, I read it. I should not have, by the rules, but I have made my peace with the fact that the rules did not imagine a thread called Mom Stuff and a mother holding it by accident 2 minutes before her whole family changed. The chat was named, and this is the detail that went into me like a splinter and is still there. The chat was named Mom Stuff. Not my name. Mom Stuff. A logistical name, an admin name, the kind of name you give a folder of tasks. And inside it were 2 years of messages. 2 years. My 3 children had created that thread within months of their father's funeral, and they had been talking in it steadily ever since. About me. I scrolled back through 2 years of my own children discussing their mother, and I read all of it, at that table, with Lisa's plumber text never coming, and the woman who had been so proud of managing so gracefully slowly came apart. I should tell you what it is like, physically, to read your children talking about you when they do not know you can hear. It is a strange and specific kind of vertigo. For 2 years, I had had a picture of how my children saw me. The capable mother, the graceful widow, the one they did not need to worry about. And that picture was a thing I had carefully maintained, and I had assumed it was hanging in their minds the way it hung in mine. And now I was scrolling through the truth of how they actually saw me, unedited, never meant for my eyes, and it did not match my picture at all. There is no preparing for that. It is like catching your own reflection in a window you did not know was there and not recognizing the person. I sat at Lisa's table and read message after message and felt the carefully built woman I thought I was simply dissolving, and I did not yet know that a truer one was going to be standing there when the dissolving stopped. I'm going to tell you what was in those 2 years of messages, but I have to tell you it in 2 parts, because there was what I saw the first time I read it, in shock, and there was what I saw the second time, after I had let myself calm down. And the 2 readings were not the same. The first one nearly broke me. The second one is the reason this story has the ending it has. The first reading was pure pain. Read in shock, that thread was a catalog of my failures. There was Greg noting that I had forgotten our lunch plans twice in a month. There was Amanda worried that the house was getting to be too much, that a gutter had gone unfixed, that I had seemed off on the phone. There was Lisa, my eldest, the words that had started all of this. I really don't think Mom should be living alone anymore. There was a back and forth about my driving. There was a genuinely difficult exchange about whether someone should look into options. Read that way, in the first hot rush of it, the thread said one thing and one thing only. My children saw me as a problem, as mom stuff, as a decline to be managed. The independent, graceful widow I had been so proud of being did not exist anywhere in that chat. In that chat, I was a burden. The exact thing I had promised Dawn's grave I would never be. I want to tell you what that first reading did to the drive home, because it is the lowest I have been since Dawn's funeral. I sat in my car in Lisa's driveway for a long time before I could even start it, and the thought going around and around in me was a simple, devastating one. I failed. I had made one promise over my husband's grave. Do not become the burden. And the group chat seemed to be the verdict that I had failed at it completely, that despite 2.5 years of effort, I had become exactly the topic, exactly the problem, exactly the mom stuff I had sworn I would not be. I drove home feeling that my whole careful widowhood had been for nothing. It would take me 2 more days and a calmer reading to understand that I had not failed the promise. I had only badly misunderstood what the promise should have been. The goal was never to need nothing. No human being past 65 needs nothing. The goal should have been to need things honestly, in the open, among people who loved me. That is a promise I could actually have kept. I drove home that day hollowed out, and I sat with it for a night, and then a second night. And on the second night, I made myself do the thing my 38 years as a social worker had actually trained me to do, the thing I had been too hurt to do at first. I made myself read it again, slowly, fairly, the way I would have read a case that belonged to someone else's family. And the second reading told a different story, because the thread was not cruel. That was the thing I had not been able to see through the pain. Nobody in that chat was mocking me. Nobody was scheming to be rid of me. What that thread actually was, read fairly, was 2 years of 3 frightened people who loved their mother and did not know what to do. Every harsh-sounding message had love underneath it. Mom shouldn't be alone was not a verdict. It was a daughter who was scared. The worry about the gutter, the driving, the forgotten lunches, those were not a catalog of my failures. They were 3 siblings, recently fatherless themselves, trying to keep their remaining parents safe and having no idea how. And there was one more thing in that second reading, the thing that turned the whole story around. I had been so focused on what they said about me that I had missed what they kept saying about themselves. Over and over, across 2 years, one of them would write some version of, "We need to actually talk to her. Someone has to bring this up with Mom. We can't keep just discussing this in here." They knew. My children knew they were doing it wrong. They knew the conversation belonged with me, not around me. They just could not figure out how to start it. There was one exchange in that thread, from about 8 months in, that I have not been able to forget, and that turned my second reading from a correction into something closer to grief. Greg had written, late one night by the timestamp, something like, "I keep thinking I'll just call her and really talk, and then I do call her and she's so determined to be fine that I lose my nerve and we talk about the weather." And Amanda had answered, "Same, every single time." And Lisa, I know, I hate this." 3 of my children, awake at night, each one wanting to reach me, each one defeated at my front door by my own performance of being fine, and then comforting each other about it in the dark. That was not a chat of children who found me a burden. That was a chat of children who missed me, who had a living mother they could not reach, and were grieving her a little, in advance, in a thread, because I had made the real me unavailable. I had thought my wall was protecting them from my needs. It had only been keeping them from my company. And then I had to look at the hardest part. I had to ask the question the second reading forced on me. Why couldn't they start it? Why had 3 grown adults who loved me spent 2 years talking about their mother instead of to her? And I knew the answer because I had built it. They could not bring the conversation to me because I had spent 2.5 years making it unbringable. Every single time one of them had reached toward the truth. "Are you really okay? Is the house too much? How are you actually doing?" I had met them with the wall. "I'm fine. I've got it handled. Don't worry about me." I had been so committed to not being a burden that I had made myself unreachable. I had given my frightened children no door, and so they had done the only thing left to them. They had taken their fear, which had nowhere to go, and they had put it in a room I was not in. The group chat was not evidence that my children saw me as a problem. The group chat was evidence that my children were scared for me and had been locked out. I had built the lock myself, and I had called it independence. And I made myself go one layer deeper because the second reading deserved that much honesty. I asked myself why I had really built the lock. I had told myself it was to spare my children the weight of me. But sitting alone with it, I admitted that there was something else underneath, something less noble. I was afraid. I was afraid of what it would mean about me, about the rest of my life, if I admitted out loud that the house was too much, and the evenings were too long, and my own mind had started to frighten me. As long as I said I'm fine, I could half believe that the decline was not really happening, that I was still the woman who managed everything. The wall was not only keeping my children out, it was keeping the truth out, holding it on the porch where I would not have to look at it. My independence, the thing I had been so proud of, had a frightened woman hiding behind it, and the group chat had just opened the door on her. I want to be honest about the shame of those days, because the shame was sharp, and some of it was the specific shame of a professional. For 38 years, I had sat in other people's living rooms and watched this exact dynamic, and I had a name for it, and I had gently explained it to 100 families. The aging parent who refuses all help out of pride. The adult children who, met with that refusal, stop asking and start managing from a distance. The slow drift from a family that talks together into a family where the elder is administered. I knew this pattern in my professional bones, and I had walked straight into the center of it in my own life and had not seen it, because when it is your own pride, it does not look like pride. It looks like strength. It looks like grace. It looks like keeping a promise to your dead husband. I had to sit with the fact that the very thing I thought was my dignity had been, the whole time, the thing dismantling my family's ability to talk to me. There was a particular professional memory that came back to me hard in those days. Years ago, I had worked with a family whose elderly father had fallen and lain on his kitchen floor for most of a day before anyone knew, because he had a medical alert pendant and would not wear it. Wearing it, he said, made him feel old. I had sat with that family afterward, and I had explained to his grown children, gently and a little wisely, that their father's refusal was not stubbornness, it was grief and fear wearing the costume of independence, and that the kindest thing they could do was to stop arguing about the pendant and start talking about the fear. I had been so clear-eyed about that man, and here I was, a few years later, a widow refusing every offered pendant of my own, every check-in, every offer, every worried question, and calling it dignity, and not recognizing my own face in a case I had once solved for strangers. It is a humbling thing, at 65, to realize you have been a textbook example of the very thing you used to teach. So, I did the thing I should have done 2.5 years earlier. I called my 3 children, and I asked them all to come to my house, in person, on a Sunday. Not to a chat, to my kitchen table. And when they were all there, Lisa, Greg, and Amanda, looking a little nervous, the way children do when a parent calls a meeting, I did not perform anger, and I did not perform fine. I had thought hard about how to do this, because 38 years of sitting in difficult family rooms had taught me at least that much, that how you open a hard conversation very nearly decides how it ends. I could have come at them with the hurt, with the betrayal, with how could you, and I understand the mother who would. But I knew, professionally and personally, that an accusation would only put 3 frightened people on the defensive, and that defensive people cannot hear anything. So I made myself set the hurt down before I started, and lead with the truth instead of the wound. I told them the truth. I told them that I had seen the chat, that I knew it was not mine to read, and that I had read it anyway, and that it had hurt me badly at first. And I watched all 3 of their faces fill with a particular dread. And then I told them the rest. I told them that once the hurt passed, I had read it again, and that I had seen what it actually was. 3 children who loved me and were frightened for me and could not find a way in. And I told them that the reason they could not find a way in was me. That I had spent 2.5 years saying I'm fine so convincingly that I had locked my own children out, and that mom stuff was a thread they had built because I had given their fear no other home. And then we did the thing the chat had been a substitute for. We talked, all 4 of us, for 3 hours at the table. I told them the truth I had been hiding, that the house was, in fact, too much, that I had been frightened by my own forgetting, that the evenings alone were long in a way I had not admitted to anyone, including myself, that I had declined every offer of help, not because I did not need it, but because I was terrified of what needing it meant. I let my children see, for the first time since their father died, that I was not managing gracefully, that I was a 65-year-old widow doing her best and struggling, and that the struggling was not shameful, it was just true. And I watched something in all 3 of them ease, because I think being shut out had frightened them far more than the truth ever could. And then I told them my one condition, and I told it to them plainly, because it mattered just as much as my confession. I told them that I would take down my wall, but that they had to take down theirs. That I was 65, not 95, and entirely capable of being part of a conversation about my own life. That decisions about my house, my driving, my future were not mom stuff to be sorted out in a thread and then presented to me. They were my life, and I would be at the table for every one of them. I told them I would rather be a mother they argued with directly than a mother they managed gently from another room. To their enormous credit, my children did not get defensive, Lisa cried, and said she had hated that chat the whole time, had always known it was wrong, and had just been too scared to be the one to knock on my door. We agreed, the 4 of us, that mom stuff was done, deleted, and that whatever came next, it came to the table. Greg said something at that table that I will keep for the rest of my life. After I had told them my condition, that I would be present for every decision about my own life, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Mom, I don't think you understand. We never wanted to decide things for you. We started that chat because we were terrified of losing you the way we lost Dad, suddenly, with things unsaid. The chat wasn't us trying to take over. It was 3 scared people who didn't know how to ask their mother to let them love her." And that undid me, because it named the thing exactly. My children had not been managing me out of disrespect. They had been reaching for me out of fear, and I had given their love nowhere to land but a thread. The whole tragedy of those 2 years, I understood, was not that anyone had stopped loving anyone. It was that a great deal of love had been left, by my own hand, with no door to come through. A year has passed now. Some things have changed in ways the chat had been quietly, correctly worried about. I have, in fact, sold the big house. I made that decision myself, with my children in the room as advisors and not as managers, and I am in a smaller place now that does not have gutters to haunt me. I let Greg help with the things Greg is good at. I see my friends again. I had my forgetting properly looked into, which is its own ongoing story, but one I am walking through with my family beside me instead of around me. The point is not that nothing was wrong. Some things were wrong. The chat was not imagining them. The point is that all of it, every hard, real, frightening piece of it, is being handled now by 4 people at a table, instead of 3 people in a thread, and 1 woman alone in a house insisting she was fine. I think often about how close I came to never knowing. If Lisa's plumber had texted first, if I had set that phone down, the thread would simply have continued. My children would have gone on loving me and worrying about me and managing me from a locked-out distance, and I would have gone on performing a grace I did not feel, and we would have lost, slowly, quietly, the simple ability to be honest with one another. An accidental glance at a phone screen gave us that back. But I have decided I will not be grateful for the accident. I will be grateful for what the accident taught me, which is that a family is only as strong as the conversations it is willing to have in the same room. There is a small new thing in my family that I treasure more than I can properly say. My children still have a group chat. Of course they do. They are siblings. That is ordinary and good. But the chat is not named mom stuff anymore, and it is not where I am discussed. When something about me, my health, my future needs talking through, it does not happen in a thread. One of them picks up the phone and calls me, or it waits for the Sunday table. I am no longer an administrative subject in my own family. I am, once again, a person in it, a person they argue with and laugh with and tell the truth to. I had been so afraid that needing my children would cost me my place as their mother. The opposite turned out to be true. It was the wall, the not needing, the I'm fine, that had been quietly costing me that place all along. Letting them in did not shrink me into a case. It restored me to the table. I want to leave you with the two things this taught me. The first is for anyone who is aging, or will age, which is every one of us. There is a promise that almost every parent makes silently to themselves. I will not be a burden. It sounds like love, and it sounds like strength, and I made it myself with my whole heart. But I am asking you to look hard at what that promise can actually do. When you refuse all help, when you answer every worried question with, "I'm fine," you are not sparing the people who love you. You are locking them out. Their fear for you does not disappear because you have closed the door. It just goes somewhere you cannot see, and festers there, and turns into a group chat called mom stuff. Letting the people who love you see your struggle is not becoming a burden. It is the opposite. It is the thing that lets them stay close enough to actually help. Pride that locks the door is not dignity. Real dignity is being honest enough to let your family in. The second thing is for the children, the siblings, the worriers, for anyone who has ever found themselves in a thread like that one. I understand how it happens. The aging parent says they are fine, and you do not believe them, and you love them, and your fear has to go somewhere. So it goes into a chat, into a conversation about them, because a conversation with them feels impossible. But I am asking you to find the courage that my children took 2 years to find. Worry, however loving, is not the same as help when it is conducted in a room the person is not in. If you are talking about someone you love instead of to them, that is a sign. Not that you are bad, but that a real conversation is overdue and frightening. Have it anyway. Pull up a chair. Knock on the door. The person you are worried about would, almost always, rather be spoken to honestly than managed kindly from a distance. Nobody should have to discover, by accident, that they were a topic. Make them, instead, a part of the conversation. If this story landed for you, drop the word "thread" in the comments below. I read them. It tells me which stories are worth telling next. Subscribe for new stories. Real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. First, refusing all help does not spare your family, it locks them out. The promise to never be a burden feels like love, but a parent who answers every worried question with, "I'm fine," does not erase their family's fear. They only exile it to a place they cannot see, where it curdles into distance and dread. Letting the people who love you witness your struggle is not weakness, and it is not burdening them. It is the only thing that lets them stay close enough to truly help. The locked door is not dignity. Honesty is. Second, worrying about someone is not the same as helping them if you never include them. When a person you love is hard to talk to, it is tempting to take your fear elsewhere, to discuss them, plan around them, manage them from a distance. But a conversation about someone is no substitute for a conversation with them. If you find yourself talking about a loved one instead of to them, treat it as a signal that an honest, frightening conversation is overdue. Pull up a chair. People would nearly always rather be spoken to plainly than managed gently from another room. Talk to people, not about them. I'll see you next time.